I'm 29, recently married, and instead of enjoying the glow of my wedding, I'm still dealing with drama from that day. What should have been the happiest moment of my life got hijacked by my sister-in-law, Dana, who is 32. Right after my husband and I finished our first dance, she actually snatched the microphone from the DJ and announced to the entire room that she was pregnant. Suddenly, people were congratulating her and my brother Kyle, who's 35, while my wedding faded into the background. On the outside, I forced myself to smile, but inside I was burning with anger. I refused to let her ruin my night by causing a public fight, so I swallowed my frustration and stayed quiet. But the truth is, she stole the spotlight that was supposed to be mine. To give a little background, Dana has always been an attention seeker. She thrives on making herself the center of every gathering. At my engagement party, she even wore a glittery white dress that looked suspiciously bridal, as if she wanted to confuse people about who the celebration was for. I let it slide at the time just to avoid conflict, but it's a pattern with her. Anytime I share something positive, whether it's a new job promotion or a car I worked hard to buy, she immediately spins the conversation to brag about how she's done something bigger, better, or more glamorous. Family dinners end up circling around her health complaints, her never-ending work issues, or whatever friend drama she's involved in that week. And if anyone dares to challenge her behavior, she bursts into tears and flips the script so she looks like the victim. Still, I never in a million years thought she'd pull something as bold as stealing my wedding moment. In the months leading up to my big day, Dana was oddly quiet, and I think it was because she hated not being the star. She wasn't chosen as a bridesmaid, but that didn't stop her from sticking her nose in where it didn't belong, giving her opinions about the decorations, the menu, and anything else she could insert herself into. I kept her at a safe distance and focused on my plans. On the wedding day, everything went perfectly until she grabbed that mic. I'll never forget sitting down with a piece of cake in my hand when her voice boomed through the speakers. She started by giving me and my husband a token congratulations, then gleefully announced that she and my brother had big news of their own they were expecting. Even my husband sat there stunned by how shameless she was. I put on my best polite face, hugged her, and told her congratulations, but underneath I was livid. Later that night, once the crowd thinned out, I finally confronted her. I pulled her aside and told her how inappropriate and selfish her timing was. She brushed it off with a phony apology, insisting she was just too excited to keep the secret and that it was pure coincidence it happened at my wedding. Kyle, of course, jumped to defend her, saying they'd been trying to have a baby for years and she was emotional. I let it go, not because I forgave her, but because I didn't want to poison my wedding night even more with a full-blown argument. I told myself I'd move forward and focus on my marriage instead of her antics. But in the weeks that followed, all the family attention shifted directly onto Dana and her pregnancy. My parents were overjoyed, already shopping for baby items and planning out the nursery. Every phone call with my mom turned into a detailed report about Dana's cravings, her nursery theme, or her supposed doctor updates. It was like my wedding had been erased and Dana was once again the star of the show. Honestly, I think that was her plan all along. At first, I tried to convince myself to be supportive. Dana and Kyle had been married 5 years without conceiving, and I knew that weighed heavily on my brother. There had always been quiet talk about fertility struggles, though they never shared specifics. So, even though her stunt on my wedding day infuriated me, I decided that if she truly was pregnant after all that hardship, I'd bite back my resentment and be happy for them. But as the months passed, things didn't add up. By the third or fourth month, she still had no bump at all. Sure, she's a bit heavier, but still, there was nothing. She also never once mentioned morning sickness, exhaustion, or any of the usual symptoms. Then 1 month after the wedding, I caught her sipping alcohol at a family barbecue. I quietly asked Kyle if she should be drinking, and he casually said her doctor told her a glass now and then was fine. It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't press it. Not long after, she posted an ultrasound picture on Facebook. The photo looked suspiciously generic, almost like a stock image. She called it her baby's first picture, but when someone asked if she'd heard a heartbeat yet, she gave a vague answer about it being too early, which didn't make sense for the stage she claimed to be at. My husband even found an app that generates fake ultrasound images, and the sample picture matched hers exactly. That's when we started to strongly suspect she wasn't pregnant at all. A couple of months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant myself. We weren't aggressively trying, but we weren't preventing it either, and when the test came back positive, we were overjoyed. I'm 4 months along now. Normally, we would have shared the news with our families already, but with Dana's ongoing charade, we've kept it under wraps. It hasn't been easy at family gatherings. I avoid alcohol, which has raised eyebrows, and I've been hiding my bump under baggy clothes. My husband thinks it's ridiculous to hide something so wonderful and wants to just tell everyone. Deep down, I agree with him. This should be a joyful time for us, but I know exactly how Dana would react. She'd accuse me of trying to steal her thunder or say I was copying her. She ruined my wedding day, and I have zero doubt she'd try to ruin my pregnancy announcement, too. At this point, Dana has doubled down on her story. She's posting weekly pregnancy updates online, talking about cravings and baby kicks, and hyping up a massive gender reveal party. Recently she even hinted that she's having twins, because of course she'd go for maximum attention. My parents and Kyle are completely invested in this fantasy. They've already painted the nursery, bought furniture, and spent a fortune on baby supplies. Watching them waste so much money and energy on a baby that probably doesn't exist makes me sick. It's honestly one of the reasons I haven't shared my own pregnancy yet. I'm afraid Dana would escalate her lies. If I announce now, I could see her pulling something dramatic, like faking a miscarriage and blaming me, or claiming I'm trying to one-up her. Part of me wants to just call her out and expose the lie, maybe even crash her gender reveal with the truth. But the other part of me knows if I do that in the wrong way, I'll be painted as the villain. Even though I'm almost certain Dana was lying, I had this tiny voice in my head saying, what if, by some miracle, she actually isn't? And that thought kept me from outright blowing things up sooner. My husband and a couple of close friends who knew the situation told me I should just go ahead and share my pregnancy news and not waste time worrying about Dana's reaction. They kept saying her little house of cards was bound to collapse sooner or later. Maybe they were right. Part of me wanted to wait until her so-called due date passed so that her lie would fall apart on its own and I could finally announce without her interference. But that would mean hiding my pregnancy for months, and it was already getting harder and harder to keep the secret. I found myself wondering, would I be the jerk for holding off just to avoid feeding into her drama? 3 weeks later, the answer started to take shape. Dana hosted this big, over-the-top gender reveal party at a park, with all the family and friends invited. She and Kyle popped this massive balloon, and out came both pink and blue confetti. Yep, she went all in, announcing she was having boy-girl twins. People erupted with cheers and started piling them with gifts. There must have been thousands of dollars worth of baby gear stacked on those tables. Meanwhile, I stood there with this sinking feeling in my stomach, knowing it was probably all smoke and mirrors. And then I made a choice that wasn't exactly subtle, but I don't regret it for a second. I saw Dana sneaking a glass of alcohol, thinking she was being discreet. In front of everyone, I called her out, asking how she could be drinking if she was supposedly pregnant with twins and that far along. The park went dead silent. Dana tried to laugh it off, brushing me aside like I was being dramatic. She claimed it was just a sip and that I was making a scene. I didn't back down. I told her straight out that I didn't believe she was pregnant at all. The reaction was chaos. People gasped, and my mom immediately tried to shush me. Dana flipped on the waterworks, bawling about how I was attacking her on her special day. Kyle looked completely lost, asking me what in the world I was doing. But I refused to retreat. I said, as clearly as I could, that I believed she was lying and had never been pregnant in the first place. The second those words came out, everything exploded. My mom rushed over, trying to calm me down. Kyle turned to Dana, asking her point-blank if any of it was true. Under that kind of spotlight, Dana crumbled. She broke down sobbing, covering her face, and finally admitted it. Right there in front of everyone, she confessed that the entire pregnancy had been fake. Some of her own friends started yelling at her, while my parents stood frozen in shock. Kyle looked completely gutted, like the floor had just dropped out from under him. Through her tears, Dana spilled everything. She said she was terrified Kyle would leave her because of their fertility struggles, and she thought faking a pregnancy might somehow hold the marriage together. She admitted she'd used an app to create fake ultrasound pictures and that her weight made it easier to pretend she had a bump. It was twisted on so many levels. Guests started grabbing their gifts back off the table, leaving in disgust. The whole party collapsed on the spot. My parents were devastated, heartbroken and furious after spending so much time and money preparing for grandchildren who didn't exist. Kyle walked away without even looking back at her. I'd never seen him so broken. He just left in silence, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. After almost everyone cleared out, Dana came to me, crying and begging me not to spread the truth beyond the people who had already witnessed it. She said she'd fix the situation by pretending to have a miscarriage, so nobody else would ever know. I told her flatly that she needed professional help, and I wasn't going to cover for her lies. Then I left with my husband. In the days afterward, my family was a storm of emotions. My mom was enraged at Dana for crushing her dream of finally becoming a grandmother. My dad looked defeated, more sad than angry. They were also a little upset with me, saying I should have handled the confrontation more privately, but deep down they knew the truth had to come out. Kyle moved into my parents' place and barely communicated with Dana, except for one text telling her she needed serious therapy. He was torn apart but also furious. As for me, I still hadn't announced my own pregnancy. I wanted to let the dust settle first. At a cousin's wedding that week, I squeezed myself into a dress that barely concealed my 5-month bump. A few relatives gave me suspicious looks, and I knew the secret wasn't going to last much longer. Kyle even pulled me aside quietly and asked if I was pregnant, noting I wasn't drinking and my body looked different. I didn't want to add to his pain in that moment, so I brushed it off with a joke about gaining a little weight. He didn't seem convinced. I decided that in the next week or so, I'll tell my family the truth. At least now, I don't have to worry about stealing Dana's spotlight because there's nothing left for her to steal. The relief of knowing her fake pregnancy is finally over is bittersweet, but it feels like the only way we can start moving on. 6 weeks later, things between Kyle and Dana had only gotten worse. At first, Kyle stayed at our parents' house, completely avoiding her. Eventually, though, he went back to their home to pack up his things and have the final showdown. That conversation turned into yet another screaming match. According to Kyle, Dana tried to twist the story and even accused me of bullying her into a breakdown at the gender reveal. She claimed she only confessed because I cornered her and insisted she was actually pregnant. She was still clinging to that lie. Kyle demanded proof, doctor's notes, appointment records, anything. She had nothing. That's when he found the fake ultrasound app on her phone, along with a collection of clearly generated sonogram pictures. When Kyle confronted Dana with proof from her own phone, she completely lost it. She went on a rampage, screaming at the top of her lungs, throwing anything she could grab, and even smashing the crib they'd set up in the nursery. Kyle didn't stick around for the meltdown. He walked out in the middle of it and told her straight up that it was over. Since then, he's officially moved out for good and already contacted a divorce attorney. Dana, of course, ran off to her parents who live across the country. She spun them a sob story about being mistreated and harassed by us. They actually believed her enough to fly in, ready to rage at me and my family. That didn't last long. Once we sat them down and laid out the real evidence, the fake ultrasound app, the lies, everything, they were horrified. Her mom broke down crying, and her dad turned red with anger at her for betraying everyone's trust. They immediately cut off whatever financial help they'd been giving her and told her point-blank that she needed serious help. With the truth finally out in the open, at least among our immediate family, I was able to share my own news. I was about 6 months pregnant by then, and there was no hiding it much longer. A few weeks after the gender reveal disaster, once emotions calmed a bit, I told my parents and Kyle. For the first time in months, there was joy instead of chaos. My mom cried happy tears, my dad was grinning ear to ear, and Kyle gave me the tightest hug, saying he was genuinely thrilled to finally be an uncle. It felt amazing to finally celebrate something real. But Dana didn't handle that well either. Somehow she found out, probably through a chatty relative, and went off the rails again. One evening, she showed up at my house, pounding on the door and screaming about how I stole her thunder and had always been jealous of her. I refused to even open the door. I yelled back that if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. She hurled a few more insults, including some nonsense about my pregnancy being a copycat stunt, but when I made it clear I was dialing 911, she finally stormed off. We called the non-emergency police line afterward just to have the incident documented. After that outburst, my parents and Kyle all told Dana in no uncertain terms to stay away from me and my home. If she pulls anything else, we're ready to file for a restraining order. The stress is the last thing I need while pregnant. Kyle's devastated by who his wife turned out to be, but he's putting his energy into the divorce and doing his best to support me. I keep telling myself that once the legal process plays out, maybe, just maybe, we'll finally be free of this nightmare. I'm clinging to the hope that my baby's arrival will bring peace instead of drama. 2 months later, I'm about 8 months along, and while Dana's mess hasn't completely stopped, it's starting to backfire on her. For starters, she actually had a lawyer send me a letter threatening to sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress because I exposed her. The claim was laughable. My lawyer practically chuckled reading it. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. Meanwhile, Kyle officially filed for divorce. Dana refuses to sign the papers and has been alternating between sending him nasty, venom-filled texts and then sobbing voicemails begging him to reconsider. It doesn't matter, the divorce will go through with or without her cooperation. Her own parents have completely cut her off financially. They're finished enabling her after the pregnancy stunt. But Dana is still scrambling to salvage her reputation. She's been telling extended family that the only reason she faked a pregnancy was because Kyle abused her and forced her into it. That outrageous lie fooled a few distant relatives who didn't know the full story, and some even called to ask if it was true. We shut that down immediately. Most of the family was horrified at her claims, but of course, it created more division. Watching her try to paint my brother as a monster on top of everything else is beyond infuriating. By this point, I couldn't keep my pregnancy a secret any longer. At 8 months, there's no hiding it. So I went public with the news. Predictably, Dana turned her obsession toward me again. She started spamming my social media with nasty comments, calling me a copycat, a liar, and every other insult she could think of. I blocked her. She made new accounts. I blocked those, too. Eventually, I just locked down everything to private. It's exhausting, but I refuse to let her poison this experience. The biggest blow-up came at my baby shower. Obviously, we didn't invite her, but she still found out where and when it was, probably from a clueless relative. In the middle of the gift opening, she barged in, shouting that she had every right to be there because she was family and that we were all cruel for cutting her out. She was yelling like a maniac in front of everyone. Luckily, we were prepared. My cousins and one of my husband's friends, who's a big guy, blocked her immediately, and an off-duty cop friend who was at the door escorted her right out. She barely had 30 seconds to cause a scene before being dragged away. Still, it was jarring and upsetting. And if that wasn't enough, the nightmare got worse. After the shower, we discovered that every single gift had been stolen from my husband's locked truck. Someone smashed a window and cleared it out. We filed a police report, but of course there's no proof tying it to Dana. Still, I have zero doubt in my mind that she was behind it. The timing, the spite, it fits her to a T. My family and friends have been amazing, rallying together to replace much of what was stolen, but the whole thing left me sick to my stomach. At this point, we're documenting every single incident. We installed security cameras at home. I even notified the hospital staff ahead of time to block any unexpected visitors once I go into labor. It feels crazy to have to live this way, but Dana has no boundaries. I'm weeks away from giving birth, and all I want is to protect my baby and hold on to some peace. I keep hoping this is the final stretch of her insanity. And then 1 week later, our baby girl arrived. She's healthy, perfect, and the joy of our lives. I wish I could say that was the end of the madness, but of course, Dana somehow found a way to inject herself into this moment, too. The day I gave birth should have been nothing but joy, but Dana managed to taint even that. While I was in the hospital holding my newborn, she went on social media and claimed she'd had a tragic stillbirth. Remember, she was never pregnant. Yet there she was, telling the world her imaginary babies had died, and she openly blamed me for it. She wrote that stress caused by certain family members, clearly pointing at me, was the reason for her loss. The fallout was immediate. A handful of people who still didn't know the truth sent me hateful messages while I was recovering, calling me a baby killer. Imagine being fresh out of delivery, exhausted, hormonal, and then reading texts accusing you of murdering children who never even existed. Thankfully, my husband and my mom jumped in fast, spreading the truth that Dana was never pregnant and that I hadn't done anything. Most people realized the reality right away and apologized, but the damage was done. Instead of soaking in happiness, I felt like there was a dark cloud hanging over what should have been one of the brightest moments of my life. As if that wasn't enough, Dana physically showed up at the hospital. We'd already warned staff about her, so when she tried to storm onto the maternity floor insisting she had a right to see her niece, security was waiting. She caused a huge commotion in the hallway, wailing about how she deserved to hold my baby since she'd lost hers. Security escorted her off the property and banned her from coming back. I can't tell you how grateful I was that we took precautions, otherwise, she might have burst right into my room. On the upside, Kyle's divorce was finalized around the same time. He's officially free of her. He's doing as well as can be expected and was thrilled to finally meet his real niece once we brought her home. We carefully scheduled his visit for a time we knew Dana wouldn't be lurking nearby. He's even avoiding posting baby photos online just to keep her from lashing out again. It's sad that we have to think about things like that, but it's the reality right now. Dana, after all this, left town to live with her grandmother, the only person still willing to take her in. She spun a story about how our family abandoned her after her pregnancy loss, and since Grandma isn't online and only hears Dana's version, she believes it. Honestly, we're just relieved she's out of our immediate orbit. If that sweet woman wants to keep giving Dana a roof over her head, fine by me, it means she's far away from us. My only priority is my baby, my recovery, and keeping my home peaceful and safe. 4 months later, here's where things stand. My daughter is thriving, but Dana's downward spiral hasn't stopped. Living with her grandmother, she quickly began exploiting her. We found out she manipulated Grandma into changing her will, leaving nearly everything to Dana as compensation for how our family supposedly traumatized her. Completely shameless. Luckily, other relatives stepped in. Her aunts and uncles got involved, worked with Grandma, and reversed the changes to protect her assets. Dana's parents were told about it too, and whatever tiny bit of sympathy they still had for her disappeared the moment they realized she was trying to rob her own grandmother. Worse yet, it came out that Dana was stealing grandma's prescription meds, painkillers, and anti-anxiety pills. Nobody knows if she was taking them herself or selling them, but either way, it was horrifying. Shortly after, Dana came back to town and broke into Kyle's apartment. She still had an old spare key and let herself in when he wasn't there. Kyle walked in to find her rummaging through his stuff, ranting like a lunatic about how he had ruined her life. He didn't even try to engage, he left, called 911, and waited outside. Police arrived and, given how unstable she was, placed her on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Honestly, it was long overdue. That incident finally forced the family to take stronger action. Care of grandma has now been shifted to other relatives so Dana can't isolate or exploit her anymore. Her parents, as heartbreaking as it is, are fully on board with these protective measures. They know she's unwell and that she's capable of real harm. On my side, we've involved law enforcement too. I filed for a restraining order to keep Dana away from me, my husband, and our baby. That decision came after she sent me terrifying text messages from an unknown number, later confirmed to be her, saying things like bad things can happen to babies and that I didn't deserve to be a mother. We turned everything over to the police. Now, on top of everything else, Dana could be facing criminal charges for making threats. If it's up to me, we're pressing charges. As of now, she's out of the short-term psychiatric hold, but her parents are pushing hard for her to enter a long-term treatment program. I truly hope she does. At this point, I don't hate her, I actually pity her. But pity doesn't mean I'll let her near my child. My family's safety comes first. If she refuses treatment, I honestly fear she'll end up in jail or worse. For us, we're focused on healing. Kyle is finalizing the divorce, going to therapy, and trying to rebuild his life after years of chaos with Dana. He's been an amazing uncle, spending a lot of time with my daughter and showering her with love. As for me and my husband, we're embracing parenthood and doing everything we can to surround our baby with nothing but safety, love, and healthy relationships. After everything Dana put us through, that's all I want now, peace.